Hi everybody, welcome to Dynamo Sword Channel. I'm David, and today on Dynamo Sword Channel I will be reviewing the Kawashima Danish Greatsword. So how does this sword fare amongst other great swords in its price range, as well as hold up to the historical original it's based on? Well, stay tuned, we'll find out. This sword classifies as a Type XVIIIe in the Oakshott typology. Now, the Type 18 is a subtype of the standard 18. The 18E is denoted by being exclusively the only great sword of the Oakshott typology. Now, being a subtype of the 18, it still features the standard characteristics of the Type 18 blade. Those being a more parallel cut and thrust blade type of diamond cross section. Now, these swords were massive, two-handed, great swords of war. And its unique traits to this type are an extra long handle ranging between 12 and 20 inches on average, and of course, the long waisted ricasso at the base of the blade. This sword also features a unique hilt, enough so that Oakshott classified it into its own hilt family, the Family L. Now, Family L is unique not only because it is exclusive to the Type 18E blade type, but also because, unlike other sword families of the typology, the hilt parts, such as the guard and pommel, are not featured in the pommel or guard typologies. They do share similarities to others in the typology. For example, the pommel type is very similar to the Type T pommels seen in the typology, and the guard is somewhat reminiscent of a strongly upturned style 6. Now, this could be because, though it is featured in the typology, these swords technically do post-date the typology as a later Renaissance greatsword. Now, these swords were also unique as they were almost exclusive to the northern regions of Europe, specifically the Scandinavian regions, though there are a few of the type that have been found in the south in Italy. It is one of the earliest used greatsword types, seeing use as early as the later 14th century. This specific sword isn't necessarily a direct replica of any exact Type 18E, but it does share similarities to two different specific Danish examples from the 15th century seen here. Now, in closing, the Type 18E was a very unique blade for the medieval period, and one that, to an extent, has the unique traits to almost be somewhat of a spear-like version of the greatsword, with its unique extra long grip and strongly acute taper. Now, these make it extremely unique to any other type of greatsword or even a longsword of the time period, making this sword not only an interesting oddity, but also a prime example of the unique sword types that did have specific combat purpose in mind. Now, let's have an overall look at the complete statistics of this sword. So its overall length is a massive 62 inches. Its weight is right at about 6 pounds, with a point of balance at about 2.5 inches from the hilt. Now, the center of percussion is right at about 23 inches from the hilt, and this class of sword, as mentioned earlier, is what would be known as a great sword. Now, the blade's total length is 43 inches. It has a base blade width of 1.5 inches at the guard where the ricasso is, and then that swells slightly to 1 7/8 of an inch where the ricasso ends and the blade kind of swells up to the edge, and then that slightly tapers down to 3/4 of an inch at the tip. Now, the material is questionable, as when these were initially sold, especially by the more renowned vendor Cult of Athena, they had them at 1045 high carbon steel. But there are also speculations or even vendors that have placed these at 1060 high carbon steel. Now, the vendor Kawashima isn't necessarily a vendor. They're actually a forge in Longquan. So I know there was variation to the steel types, and those usually denoted and were based on the price that the swords were sold. Since this was kind of sold at a lower price point, I ended up buying it on Amazon. I would probably say it's safe to say that it is 1045, but it could be 1060, either way. So its finish is a nice satin, and the cross section, as you can see, is a prominent diamond, and then it does feature that fuller going about 3/4 of the blade with the wide, short fuller in the ricasso. Now, as mentioned in the historical section, the blade type is the unique subtype 18E in the Oakshott typology. Moving on to the guard's total length is 8.5 inches. Now, the quillion dimensions are 1 inch at the end, at the widest here, and then that slightly tapers down to about 1/2 inch towards the handle. Now, the inner portion of the guard is about 1/4 inch, and then that widens up to about 3/4 of an inch at the handle. Now, the material is a stainless steel with a satin finish. And again, the guard is a uniquely, strongly curving, unclassified guard style that is unique to both the Family L and, of course, the 18E great swords as well. Now, the handle's total length is 15 3/4 inches. Now, the base circumference is 3.5 inches, and that slightly tapers to 3.25 inches at the pommel. Now, the handle is a nice wood, and the finish is a darkened lacquer, and then it also has these unique but historically accurate wired sections that spread throughout the hilt. Now, the pommel's total length is 3 inches. The pommel width at the face here is about 2 inches, and then that tapers down to about 1 inch at the beginning of the handle. Now, the pommel circumference is 6.5 inches at the top, and that wastes down to 3 3/4 inches at the grip. Now, the material, like the guard, is a stainless steel, and it also shares the same satin polish. Now, its construction, as you can see, is peened, and it has a pretty decent peened finish. And the type, again, due to its family L uniqueness, is unclassified, but you could consider it, due to its scent stopper style, very similar to the more traditional Type T variants in the Oakshott typology. Now, moving on to the scabbard, this sword does feature a scabbard, even though it is a great sword and it is quite large for it. It is a nice wood core scabbard that is painted with a nice black matte finish and features a stainless steel throat and chafe. Now, overall, it fits the sword pretty well, even though, as you can see, it is definitely hard to kind of get it on and off. But it is nice to have to, keep the blade protected and also keep others protected from the blade, since it is sharpened and is rather large. So as far as its fit, it is a little loose around the base ricasso, as you can see, so it easily slides and then it'll slide down. But it does, due to the swelling at the end of the ricasso, hold it rather tight, so you don't really have to worry about it falling out if you had it upside down. But as you can see, it is also rather tight to get out. Overall, though, even though it's kind of odd to have a scabbard for such a large sword, it is a nice feature to have, especially if you plan on carrying it, especially on the back, like at a Renaissance fair or something, or you want to, kind of display it and don't want the sharpened edge exposed, or to keep it housed so the blade, doesn't get marred or stained or rusty. Overall, I'd say, yeah, nice scabbard, really well made, and overall has a really nice um, overall general fit, no rattle. Really neat scabbard, especially for the price point. Now, this great sword was manufactured and or distributed by the Longquan Forge or vendor known as Kawashima. Now, it's known amongst the sword enthusiast community that this forge is one of the largest in Longquan and supplies many vendors of Chinese-made swords, with both European, Chinese, and of course Japanese-styled swords. Now, this specific sword was initially sold as a special edition in collaboration between Ronin Katana and the Sword Buyer's Guide store's Project X line of swords, initially named the Crom Killer. Now, this sword originally had a full wire wrap, even though it was a kind of popular item. It still sold at a limited quantity, so many people weren't able to get one of those initial models. Now, soon after, the vendor Cult of Athena began selling these Kawashima models, as well as other swords that mirrored Ronin Katana European offerings, but were sold with, as mentioned, either 1040 to 1045 or 1060 high carbon steel blades. Now, they were also initially sold at a lower premium price, which made these swords, definitely quite appealing to the budget sword enthusiast, with many picking up these models to try. Even I tried one of the initial war sword models and reviewed it earlier on when I started the channel. Nowadays, it's really nice because you can actually find these models all over the internet on various vendor sites, even Amazon, which is, as I mentioned, where I purchased my model. But regardless of how many vendors are selling these, remember it is always my recommendation to buy from a well-known vendor with good customer service and of course an honest and up-to-date inventory. So remember to look in the description for links to my picks of where to buy this model at, of course, the best price and buyer security. Now this sword overall has a nice fit and finish that complements the style and elegance of the 15th century greatsword it replicates. The blade is appropriately shaped and strongly tapers to a fine, sharp, acute point. Now the cross section is diamond and features a nice, strong central ridge which reinforces the blade to keep it flexible but also, moderately rigid for its size. Now further down towards the hilt, the blade does feature that unique to the type, unsharpened and wasted ricasso. Now the guard is another unique trait of the type of sword and is very similar, as I mentioned, to a style 6 guard, but much more curved in what could be considered a C or U shape. It is cast well and is made of stainless steel, as is the norm for most of these budget Chinese-made European swords. It seats to the ricasso, pretty well, and also sits nice, tight, and flush to the grip. The grip is also nicely finished and feels great in the hand. It is of appropriate length for this specific sword type, which, as you can tell, very big. It is incredibly long, and it is made of a nice stained and lacquered hardwood, and features a very nicely shaped octagonal shape, especially for its sub $300 price point. Now the grip is finished with 5 wire wrapped sections to match the historical originals it's based on. Now these are done, kind of moderately well, but due to the lacquered wood, they do tend to slide and move a little more than personally I would like. They do their job, but to an extent are kind of an eyesore, and due to the tacks that they use can kind of catch your hand when gripping directly on the wired section. There is also a slight minor flaw in mine, as where they were tacking, there are a few slight cracks in the wood. So eventually I'm probably going to have to repair those, get like some wood putty and seal them before I actually start using this sword for cutting exercises. Now moving on to the pommel though, the pommel is nicely cast and is a prime replica of the historical Type XVIIIe or Family L scent stopper it's based on. Now, as I mentioned, these pommels are very reminiscent of Type T pommels and would probably fit the description of a Type T4 or, if it had a little more truncated top, Type T5 with a little more length and wasting. It is also nicely peened to the tang, and it sits flush with the facets of the octagonal grip, so that is a nice touch for the price point. Overall, I would say that, it is an extremely well, nicely made pommel, nice and tight, peened well, fitted to the guard correctly with the octagonal shape. Definitely a highlight of the sword. Now, regarding handling, now this sword feels like one would expect a great sword to handle. It is large and heavy, but not enough to where it is cumbersome or unwieldy. It is nicely balanced and actually moves surprisingly well for its large size. Now, the extra long grip can kind of take some getting used to, uh, but overall, once you get a feel and understanding of how this sword is used and how it should be handled, it is actually quite quick and responsive. Now, as mentioned earlier, this sword is meant to be more or less a primary thrusting sword, and it is more than capable of being more versatile and cut and thrust with its broader blade base and with that acute tip. Now, if its extra long grip is utilized properly, it gives an advantage to both the cut by allowing the user to make large arching sweeps and cuts, as well as extended far reaching thrusts. Now, the wasted recalso also allows one to half sword the blade in either a bind or close quarters, which again adds to the versatility of the blade. Overall, for a budget greatsword, this is really well balanced and handles great, and I highly recommend it on those merits. Now, on to the durability and construction. I would feel pretty competent using this sword as a regularly used cutting or practice weapon. In my judgment, this sword would be adequate for medium to light target cutting, and I also feel confident, kind of maybe giving this sword a shot on heavier targets. Now, thrusting exercises should be a blast with this sword's, tapered profile, and of course, this extended short spear-like grip, and of course, half swording with the ricasso. The only fear I have is, where I have the splitting of the grip and that potentially cracking or splitting more through, kind of shock and absorption from cutting. Now, if I was purchasing this sword, I honestly, or if I was in the creation of this sword, I would probably get rid of the wire wrap, even though it is kind of historically accurate. Or at least I'd find a better method to attach it rather than the tacks, because I feel, the tacks are what, kind of cause the splitting and the cracking, or perhaps even using a, kind of denser, stronger wood that won't split or crack. Again, I like how it looks overall. It gives that, presentation of being historically accurate. But again, a little leather or even just the plain solid wood at this price point and budget wouldn't be bad, just to kind of potentially eliminate that potential failure from the grip wood splitting. Now, in closing, I really have been, kind of sitting on the fence regarding this sword for years. I mean, I've always feared this sword's price point was just a little too good to be true, especially it being a great sword, as they are definitely, one of the harder sword types to get right, especially at the sub $300 price point. Overall, though, I was actually pleasantly surprised with how well put together this sword was, um, you know, for the price point, and am extremely impressed in how well balanced it is and how good it feels in the hand. Now, personally, I would recommend this sword for anyone looking for that unique Type 18 greatsword, or a good quality sub $300 budget greatsword in general. But I definitely would just kind of be wary on the potential failures of the grip, and would really suggest to any of the vendors or the forge manufacturer to kind of try to change up this wire wrap, and either use some kind of epoxy to glue it, or do some proper pilot holes for the wire to go in and then wrap around, and you can twist knot and tie it around like they were traditionally done. It's just one of those things that, really, really nice, well heat treated blade, tight pommel guard, and then you got this wood grip crack that was just kind of disappointing to see. And this is what kind of adds to that extra unfortunate of kind of finding the grip flaw, because the Type 18C blade type is very obscure, and it's one that hasn't seen much replication in the production market. So far there have only been 3 offered: the initial Crom Killer, that in turn became this model, and of course the high-end Abalon Dane, which is, I believe, out of production at this point, but of course can still be found on the secondhand market. But yeah, the Dane definitely 10 times the price of this guy, because they're around $2,000-3,000, and this guy is right around 250, maybe 280 on the sites that sell it. So if you are on a budget, I would say this is a great pick for a quality version of this type of sword. Just again, and maybe I just got unlucky, maybe you won't, but just kind of keep an eye on the grip, and definitely guys that are selling it, or again the manufacturer, yeah, definitely try to eliminate these little tacks that are not only obnoxious to grip, but also crack the grip, or at least if you guys notice it's cracking the grip, you guys should have changed it. That's just something that did disappoint me initially. Would I still recommend this sword? Yeah, absolutely. I think for sub $300 you can't really go wrong, because worst case scenario, like I said, you can buy in the grip, fill it with wood putty like I plan to do, more than likely, and I'll probably give you guys an update when I do it eventually. But I will be taking the wire off, kind of filling those cracks with the wood putty filler, letting it set, and then more than likely giving it a cord overwrap, and then a nice full leather grip like I do with most of my swords. Well, I think that'll be it for this review. I hope you enjoyed viewing it, and it helps with your opinions on this sword. Now be sure to like and subscribe, as well as look for future content from Dynamo Sword channel. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.